So like Lisa said, we're going to walk through the new finished sample SWIS process for obtaining your color samples for a project, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a background on paint finishes. Color consistency in the past, as you all know, has been a struggle for us over the years. There are spray coatings for extrusion and plate panels, and then there is a coil coat for products like composite panel. It is important to match these colors the way that they are applied at the factory. So that is why there are different paint formulations for each application and why you can't use a coil coat for a spray application and vice versa. The largest variance happens in spray coatings for micas and metallics. It is because of the flake orientation, these paints are randomly scattered and suspended differently between your different applicators. There can also be color variance due to inconsistency in mill thickness of the paint. The AMA 2605 standard recognizes this variability in the coatings and suggests a maximum deviation in color of 2 delta E. They also recommend final color approval should be with actual production line samples rather than the laboratory prepared samples. That is because each applicator's equipment sprays differently. We can have the same batch of paint and send it to 2 different applicators and the color can look different. Ideally, it would be best to only use one applicator for the entire project, but logistically, it is not feasible to do so. We can try to help control the variation in color by limiting the number of applicators being used for the different products on a project. And to try to help ensure color consistency for our painted products, we have developed the SWIS on the steps to follow, starting with requesting samples to submit for approval, all the way to actually submitting vendor production line samples for record. So I am going to let Bree pick it up from here and go through the SWIS.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. So you guys have actually seen this. I think it was our 3rd quarter offsite last year, or one of our last in-person offsites. We ran through this before, and we've since made a few tweaks to it. So I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to go through it step by step, just to kind of make sure I cover all bases. You guys know I read fast, so we'll get through it quickly. But if you have any questions, please, if you could just save them to the end, and then we can address them accordingly. All right, so this is the finished sample approval SWIS. Step 1, the PM is to procure finished colors from the architect. You're going to request the paint chip finish number or the color chip that we're required to match. Note, if it's a custom color, inquire if it needs to be a 2-coat solid, a 2-coat mica, or a 3-coat metallic finish. We have run into instances where they're just like, give me this color, and then later we give them the color, and they're like, no, we actually wanted a 3-coat. So when you're requesting the samples, just make sure that the architect gives you that information. Make sure the customer request is what was specified in the estimate, because there is price differences between 2-coat and 3-coat, as you guys know. And why is because the customer should provide the samples so we can ensure we are matching the correct colors. Step 2, the PM will fill out the finished warranty form. This is the form that actually Heather or I will be sending you. You guys have all kind of seen this. You denote the paint warranty, if there's any anodized finish special notes that need to be on here, and all of the good information that we require. Make sure that you read the specs for the finish warranty time period, list finishes for both extrusion and panels, and then if anything changes with the colors, please provide a new form, because we will request new samples, and we use this form when we request samples from Western. And then the why is so that we can get pre-approved for the paint warranty and discover any issues ahead of time. Step 3, I will email, or the PM is to email me requesting a quantity of 6 3x3 finish samples from the paint manufacturer and include that warranty form that I just showed you guys. Request all finishes required on the project if there are multiple colors, and identify the colors for extrusion and the colors for panels if there's a difference. Review the color samples against the samples provided by the architect. So I will give you the finish samples that you've requested, and then you'll review them. And then just to confirm they match. And then we have a link to the AMA standards, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with there. If the paint manufacturer samples match, write up a submittal in the portal and send to the GC for approval. Submit each color if there are multiple colors on the project, and provide 3 samples of each color, and then include the disclosure if applicable. So we've created a disclosure that some of you have probably seen already for any paint that has like a mica or metallic finish. And that's just because, as Heather mentioned in her intro, there is a lot of variation depending on the plane that you look at these finishes once they're sprayed on. So we want to make sure the customer is aware of that, and that the lab prepared sample could have a difference from the samples that we're submitting, and that difference can carry through to the material as it's painted. Disclosure, if paint manufacturer samples are rejected, close out the submittal as rejected and repeat steps 2 through 5. So just obtain more samples and we'll go from there. Once your approval is received from the GC, PM to close out submittal and portal. You guys know how to do that. At that point, you're going to email me to request production extrusion samples from the extruder. So you'll include the finish colors and date shown on the paint chip label in your email. Request the extruder to provide 4 12-inch production line samples. And these will be used as our control samples moving forward. So if the panel is going to be the same finish as the extrusion, break shapes, all of that, we will use this control sample moving forward for all matches moving forward. You will email me to request the production samples from certified if there is a difference in the panel finishes. So here's kind of all the details on what sizes I will get for you. And then there's just a why here. The manufacturing 3x3 samples are lab prepared and are not electrostatically charged during this process, which will cause a variation on mica and metallic finishes. So we just, again, as Heather mentioned, we want to make sure we're maintaining consistency in our finishes between what's extruded and painted versus what's fabricated and painted. Step 10, once I have all of the samples, Brandon will notify the PM that production samples for extrusion and panels are a good match based upon the spectrometer reading, and I will place them on the PM's desk. This email will also include a copy of the signed and dated panel sample. And approval is based upon Delta reading guidelines. The readings and picture of approved panel sample are saved in the job folder under Projman Materials Finish QC. So what I do when I receive your samples is initially I compare the PPG chip to the samples that is provided by Western. So I compare the PPG chip to the Western extrusion samples. And then that Western extrusion sample, that production line sample, will get sent to certified to produce that full sample set, which includes the 12x12s, the 6x6s, and then some 3x3s just for you to keep on hand. And what I do is once I receive the certified samples, I will read those. I will get the readings, all of the LAB readings here, which is kind of what we use to match and make sure that the color is consistent. And I will document all of those on this Project Paint QC form. And again, this form is going to be saved in your job folder in Projman Materials Finish QC. So once I have everything dialed in and the samples are approved, I will take a picture of the back of the sample and I'll save that in that same Finish QC folder. And then I will send out an email that looks like this. And it will say your finished samples from certified for your project are approved. Attached, please find the approval pics for the following colors, and it'll list the colors that we reviewed. It'll include a picture of the signed and dated chip that you can then forward to your panel vendor, whoever is going to be your panel vendor. They can send it to certified, or I can send it to certified directly, depending on who's working with them for the materials that you purchased. Okay, so PM to submit, at this point, the PM is to submit 2 each 12x12 panel samples and 2 each 12-inch extrusion samples to the GC for record via transmittal on the portal. So this is just you telling them, hey, these are the colors. We started all the way back from the colors you gave us. Here's what's going to end up being on your job. You're going to submit to them the Western line samples as well as the certified samples. I will place all of those on your desk so that you have them at your leisure. And then you'll clearly note that these are production samples for record on your submittal, so the architect knows what to expect on the building by seeing production quality and color. PM to email a copy of the signed and dated label of panel production sample to panel fabricator via transmittal in the portal. You'll copy Caesar on the email to the panel vendor. As you guys know, he is involved in shop use break shapes and panels right now. Walters and Wolf Glass will request all panel finish samples from certified in lieu of the panel fabricator requesting the samples. So sometimes you'll order your field use panels, those will be painted certified, so you'll still have your copy of the signed and approved chip that you can send on to your panel vendor for that purpose. To ensure color consistency and to keep a consistent process with certified enameling. PM to provide 6x6 production line samples as needed for other project required painted materials. This includes louvers, operable windows, sunshades, etc. Do not send the manufacturing lab created color chip because we've done everything we could to match from that chip. And this is to ensure the best color consistency between various products and applicators. And the final step, the PM to provide 6x6 production samples if requested from the GC. And this is for other trades to match if required. And so everyone is matching to the production material. And that's it.
Good job, Bree. Any questions?
I have one. Can you go back down to the louver and other operable window type stuff? So if they are sending us a chip and they're saying, hey, from our painter, such as Aerolite, their painter's back east somewhere where the windows are being made or the louvers are being made, and they send you this and they say, we need approval of this. You were coming in kind of, my audio wasn't working that well. Can you repeat what's happening there in that step 13?
So that step, we're actually giving you extra samples to submit to your louver or operable vent provider so that they can match based on what we've already approved.
Okay,
You know what I
and
mean?
if their painter says, well, we need approval before we go into production, we're just saying, this is your sample, and that's, I mean, they're gonna send us something back, right, to verify against?
Yeah, most of the time they do. So then you can look at it and compare and make sure that their color matches the color we submitted to them.
Yeah, Paul,
For painting.
you still want to make sure your louver or operable window guy sends you a sample to approve. It's just instead of you giving them like the UC number or giving them the little 3x3 PPG sample, we want to give them a sample of production quality to match. So there's
Okay,
going to be
that's
your normal matching, but we just want them to match it off of a production sample versus, and we're calling it production sample. It's not production because it's not when the actual job is getting produced, but it is getting painted and provided in the same process by the paint company that you're doing your full project through versus the PPG lab that is just made in a little box. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, that was the part I missed in the
Yeah.
audio. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Sorry,
And so
Rick.
when will that happen? When are we getting those 6x6 production line samples? That's not a match of production material. This is just happening after the initial request or getting paint chip process.
No,
already happening, right?
the 6x6 samples are a match from production material. So certified.
So how
Go ahead.
yeah, so I'm just not sure how you can get an operable window or a glaze-in louver if you're waiting, you know, like shop use break shapes, like you can turn those around pretty quick, or you can make them, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know how we can wait to get a 6x6 production line match for a shop use item, a buyout product.
So if we're doing all of this early in the process, so as soon as you get the approved color, and hopefully that's before we start material takeoffs, we can get all this done before then.
I think the confusing thing on this SWIS is it's saying production line sample. Maybe it should say production quality sample. So it's from the actual painter that's going to do your production, you know, but it's not like Brian, they're not holding up to start making your shop use break shapes and at that time give you these samples. They're giving it to you earlier.
Yeah,
because I mean, that's confusing because on Harbor Bay, we got a match later while, you know, the glazing panels were in production. I had put them on hold. The shop use brake shapes were released, and we were waiting until we had an approved production line match.
Yeah.
And like that all worked out in like a 3-week period right before, you know, they were able to get here. But louvers and operable windows, if we did that same process, that wouldn't work. So I'm just hung up on the specifics of the timeline there, I guess.
Yeah, we're trying to get in front of it as much as possible. And honestly, this process has been in place, has been like beta tested in place for probably the last 2 months, 2 or 3 months. So as soon as we get that form, this form that you guys provide to us with all of your paint information, this goes out to Western requesting those production line samples. So we're trying to be way ahead of it. And I think Harbor Bay is kind of a different case, but
Yeah,
Well, we're not getting the production line samples until the PM notifies us that the customer approved it for the project.
yeah, you're right. Sorry about that.
All right, so we're basically just having Western and certified established production line quality early, as opposed to waiting for actual extrusions to
Correct.
then match.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically,
That
you're
makes
gonna, Brianna, are we doing basically like 2 approvals? So initially, we'll do, if the architect specs a PPG color, we get a PPG chip,
Mhm.
get that approved, and then we're gonna do another match, a line match, and resubmit that. Is that yes or no? Is that how we're doing that?
Yeah, and that one will just be submitted for record, saying, okay, thanks, you know, they approved the little 3x3. So now we went and we got line quality samples. We will then submit that as just for record, saying that it's production quality sample.
Because there's many times, and I've experienced this, where your little PPG chip and your line sample
Mhm.
are not an exact match, as people know, and it depends. Like, you can have a very difficult architect that might battle you on that a bit.
Yeah. And that's kind of where all this came from originally, Candace. Well, obviously the Moffett Towers, Manhattan Beige Pearl debacle. And I never really, you know, it's always been on the back of the label of those three samples. And it says, do not use this for approval, you know, and the biggest reason I feel that there's a discrepancy between that 3x3 and production is because those little samples are not electrostatically charged when they're painting it. So the mica, all that lays completely different.
Well, yeah, and it's a different material too than what we
Yeah.
would typically spray.
So,
So maybe when we go in to do our little 3x3 submittals, just as for the PMs, we can be like, hey, Mr. Architect, this is like the initial color sample from PPG. We're going to do a final for construction, like line sample. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
yeah.
Just, there's so many things to do now.
At the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
and then Western's good doing a production line match or establishing whatever early, and then they're confident that they can reproduce the same thing with a different batch of paint at a later date when they actually extrude.
Yeah,
Okay.
when they provide us those production quality samples, if that's what we're going to call it, they're actually retaining a piece of that for the project. And then when they go to paint the project, they're making sure that they stay within the 2 deltas of what they provided us.
Okay.
So production quality samples, we will make a note of that.
It might be nice if you guys or someone creates like a generic letter about what the delta can be from the line sample, like from the starting phase of the 3x3. I mean, if we're going through all this, why not, you know? The
Yeah.
3x3 to the 6x6 to the actual production material. Like, these are the these are the variations that can happen. I mean, most architects are not super difficult. Like, you know, you're going to have like one every few jobs probably, but I don't know, some generic wording like we have for everything else in this
Hey, can
era.
we use these samples for our adhesion testing so that process starts sooner? Or do we have to use,
No.
I
We
think you have
will
to use
have-
production
no.
material.
No, we have to use samples that are painted at the time of production. I already discussed that several times with management.
oh, man,
And they said, no, it needs to come from actual production material. So Bree and Caesar on the panels and brake shapes, they're working with Certified to include additional samples when they paint. So when we receive it, we can get them sent out for testing.
yeah, it just seems like we get the Dow reports a little late and the shops
Yeah.
already start and stuff like that. That would have helped
Totally.
expedite it.
Yeah, we totally tried to do that, Travis. and
Yeah.
For a while, I thought it was okay, and then I guess it's not.
We have used them, but I was told we need to get it off of at the time of production material is produced.
And then
And-
back to Candace's comment about having a letter. So there is that disclosure for color variation.
Mm-hmm.
Is on line 5. It doesn't talk about all the steps we're going to use. So maybe we can just take another look at this letter and maybe walk it through. I mean, it's just here you're using this, it's lab created, we'll provide a production line sample for record, you know.
Which can vary, delta 2, blah, 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 something like that.
Yeah.
Because I know not an architect that I'm working with right now probably has no idea what any of that means, but an architect that I just finished a job with knows literally every bit of that information. So would be nice.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good suggestion.
Hey, Heather, on the paint on the metal, is it possible that once Western starts producing it, they could cut off a couple chunks, 6 inches, and send it before, and we don't have to wait for the whole truck?
That's a good idea.
I've asked for that and they're not set up to do that. And then it wastes material and we could end up being short on what our requirements are for a line item.
Okay.
So I've tried walking through that with them and they're just not set up to do it. I've tried it with Hydro as well and it doesn't work.
Is this something that they could send out for us? Maybe.
No, I've gone down that path.
Sorry, I got off topic.
You could save these questions for the Dow sample submittal next week.
Reflection there, Bree.
Just got a twofer.
Wow.
Good job, Bree. We'll probably give you the same answer, but
Alrighty, well, so maybe we'll make a few little revisions to this, and then Bree, you think you'll pass this on to get uploaded into the portal this week or next week, or?
Yeah, no, we can, in the next couple weeks, we can have it updated and sent off for submittal to the portal.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody have anything else?
Nope.
Alrighty.
Good job, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
all right,
Good job.
thanks.
Thank you.
Good job, guys.
Guys.
Good job, guys.
Thank you.